Hello, and welcome back to your favorite witchy podcast, As the Cauldron Bubbles. This is your host, Jasmine. Good to see you all back again. I'm excited. I have two lovely guests with me, not one, but two. So go ahead and introduce yourself, whoever wants to go first, and we'll just kind of follow this similar rotation for the duration of this podcast.
Hello, it's Sydney. You guys know me as Crap and Magic. You can find me on YouTube. I'm coming back. We'll have a video up soon. And also, you can find me as your auntie in the occult, helping you with all crazy things that are happening in your life. Okay. Love you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paige. I am a friend of Jasmine and Sydney's, and I have been a practicing witch for almost 2 years now. And I'm just here to give my input and a perspective from a newer person in the craft.
So excited to have you both here. And today's topic, we are going to be talking about dedications and initiations. So, why don't we first kind of go around and talk about how we personally define what a dedication is? Sid, why don't you go ahead and start us off? How would you define a dedication?
A dedication to me is a personal rite, ritual, and or like service, I guess, that you give to whatever entity, whatever higher power, whatever source you work with, or even to yourself, because there are things as self-dedications, to essentially say that I am a part of this, like, grouping, community, like these are my this is like my name, this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to be, and I'm willing to take this journey with you for X, Y, and Z reasons.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And I would also add that I think a dedication, for the most part, is like an individual thing. Um, I personally have never done a dedication with someone else unless they were going to. I guess I wouldn't say I wouldn't do it with someone else. Like if we were both going to dedicate ourselves to the same deity and we were like studying and working with this deity together, maybe. But like for the most part, I feel like they're really personal and they're done kind of on an individual basis. Like this is a need that I see or a path that I want to take in my own craft, so I'm going to dedicate myself to it. And I feel like it's just kind of a more personal thing, individual thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the key word for me when it comes to dedication is the individual. I think of the individual when I think of a dedication. Now, I definitely agree about dedicating to a divinity. So, whether it be like you dedicating yourself as a priest or a priestess or clergy to a pantheon or a specific deity or an energy current. And as Sydney said as well, there's self dedications, meaning that you are dedicating yourself or dedicating to yourself. I know a lot of witches also will just dedicate themselves to the craft, or when they kind of begin their process of seeking, learning, and understanding, they'll do a dedication ritual to dedicate themselves. And this is more so with like BTW style traditions, but like when they start their year in a day, they'll dedicate themselves to learning for that year in a day, and then after that year and a day has passed, they will dedicate themselves and actually claim the title of witch. Because for some people, claiming the title and using the title is kind of a monument, like a monument, a milestone, I guess would be a better way to put it, in their practice. So Yeah, I agree with what both of you said. To me, a dedication is something personal, it's something intimate between you and your spirituality. And I believe that you can dedicate yourself or you can dedicate yourself to something. But to me, a dedication is something that you completely do on your own. Um, with like no one else really involved. The only time I could really see that being different, kind of Paige, like what you said, is if a group of people were dedicating themselves to something. Or another idea is we have dedication rituals in our modern day marriage ceremonies where couples will dedicate themselves to each other. In a way, I think that's kind of a dedication ritual. But and talking about initiations, Sid, how would you define initiations and how would you define them as separate from dedications?
So I feel when it comes to initiations I feel like are far more serious. Not saying, I don't know, it's kind of like the conversation of like, is it ceremonial magic or is it folk magic? Initiation to me is very ceremonial in the sense that I am indoctrinating myself into this path, this next step into the craft, this next turn of the spiral, if you will. And I feel like it's more so a I feel like with a dedication, not that you can't be non-committal, but I feel like the first step is a dedication, and then I feel like when you get initiated or indoctrinated into your next path or the next, step of your journey, that is more serious because I feel like whether it's covenry or whether it's like solitary, you are going about it in a way that you are putting yourself in more so in lines with the philosophies, belief systems, deities, gods, and energies that you work with. Like you are saying, like if I was to dedicate myself to like the the mysteries, like the mystery schools under like the god Thoth, like in the Egyptian pantheon, I feel like that would be a full initiation. I don't feel like that would be a dedication. I feel like the dedication would be me already doing that work. And then the initiation is like, no, I am indoctrinating myself into this next step.
Absolutely. I feel like initiations are a bigger step. I feel like too they're more long term. Like I could dedicate myself to a deity, work with that deity for X amount of time, and then, move on to work with a different deity and dedicate myself to that. You know what I mean? Like, but an initiation, I feel like, is more long term. You're committing yourself. I also feel like too, initiations are you can't necessarily do it yourself. And I'm not one to tell somebody how to practice. I know there are people out there that believe they can self initiate, but like in my personal belief, and I'm not telling you you're wrong if you think that, but for me personally, the way that I define dedication and initiation, if you are, quote, initiating yourself, I think that you are more dedicating versus like an initiation needs to kind of be done by someone or a group of people who have maybe been down this path longer than you or have a little bit more knowledge and have kind of overseen your um some of your progress as you've gone down those paths, and that person in that group has kind of been like, okay, like you're doing what you're supposed to do, like you're really putting in the work, so we're ready to initiate you, be it into a coven or into a tradition or whatever. And I think that you almost kind of need not necessarily a mentor, but like you almost need a group of people or someone who's been down that same path or a similar path that can look at you and say, okay, like I'm going to welcome you into this fold through this initiation, and we're going to now be in this together in some way. Like we're tied together in some way. Because, like, I also feel like an initiation is a melding of energies with you and another person or people, and you're forming bonds there that should not be lightly discarded or cast aside or neglected. So that's different than a dedication, because a dedication is like you're the one holding yourself accountable to that, right? Like you're the one who's holding yourself accountable to, I'm dedicating myself to learning more about, Hecate or whatever. But an initiation is like now you've got other people involved, they depend on you, um, and you're tied to them in some way, if nothing else, than by this magical ritual of initiation. So that's kind of how I see it. That's why I think they're a lot different.
Yeah, I think a big part of initiations for me is like with dedication, I feel like we're looking more at the self. It's what you yourself and your path and your practice, it's what you specifically are doing on your own path at the time of your dedication. Um, and I kind of view initiations as more than just the self and connecting more so to a group, a coven, a kindred, a grove, and, a tradition. Um, Obviously, we have closed practices, right? That the only entrance to these practices are through initiation. I think that in a way, our coven is similar to this in the sense that there are certain teas that are only for the initiated, and that's very much how mystery traditions, um, be it of the days of old or neo mystery traditions, work. Is that there's certain information that is just not for the general public, and so how you access this information is through initiation. So um, I agree. Like I also don't feel like I have any place to tell someone how to practice necessarily. But speaking from my own practice, my own experience, and my own personal, you know, beliefs, I think that you kind of, in a way, cannot initiate yourself. To me, initiation is like being brought into and through something. Another big difference to me is that an initiation is supposed to be a trial, as opposed to a dedication is kind of more like a bold statement. It's kind of like saying, I claim this, or I adhere to this, or I believe in this, or I commit to this. Versus, to me, an initiation is kind of more, I'm going to go through this. Um, it's very much a verb in the sense that it's something that you are actively doing. Like you are going through an initiation, and it's supposed to kind of test you and go through trials, and tribulations, if you will, in the sense that you're being brought through. So that's kind of how I would personally separate the idea of dedication versus initiation. I think that initiations are definitely much more serious because it's involving more than just yourself. And I agree as well. I think, if you're initiating into something, you're tapping into that sort of frequency and you're connecting with those people who are initiated in the same way and rights that you are. So I think the next question would be, how and why can dedications slash initiations be beneficial to us? Why do we need them, or why don't we need them? What does this look like for us as individuals? Sydney?
Um, I I find them to be beneficial. Um, I've been walking the path for like, I don't know, like over 10 years at this point, in the sense of like study. But when it came to like practice, it's been in the last like 4 or 5 years. So I would say that like when I dedicated myself to the craft, I knew I was serious because I did a modern day blood ritual, aka getting a tattoo. And for me, the way I, dedicated myself to the craft was to do this way of marking my body, marking my temple, marking, my being, because I kind of felt like in, you know, in a lot of like these very toxic relationships that I had been in prior to that, I had so many people who were kind of like gaslighting me in the sense of like, oh, well, you can't be a witch. There's no way. That's not a thing. You can't be one. I've heard people are, but you can't be one. So to kind of like force that kind of idea out of my head, I put myself through pain, if you will. And I feel like it was the best decision I made for me and myself and I, because that's kind of what I needed. I found it beneficial because I don't have that doubt anymore. I wake up every day and look at this mark and I say, like, I don't know, it's like I tell the kids, if you will, or my clients, I'm like, that's when I knew I was like, dedicating myself to the craft, by saying like, I'm a witch, because that's the word I ascribe to. I also think initiations are beneficial, to me, because it makes me feel like you're going to the next level. It makes me feel like, if life is a video game, you know what I mean? And if you have like, a couple extra lives, where are you putting these lives into? You know what I mean? Is your is your next side quest going to lead to you getting initiated into some mystery coven, some mystery school, some mystery path? I don't know. That's kind of up to you. That's between you and the gods, in my opinion. But I also feel like you do not have to be initiated in order to like receive the gifts and bounty and harvest, if you will, of good wealth, good health, and a good life, being in the craft. Same thing if you've never heard of a dedication ritual, baby, you do not have to do it. If you feel like that's personal for you and you feel like you want to do so, go ahead. But like for me, as soon as you start, figuring out the differences of like um herbs versus like how to use them in oils and then how to use them in ritual practice, you're already on your way of witchcraft. You're already doing the work. So you are what you are. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I've done both dedications and initiations recently. So when I did my dedication, my first one was to witchcraft. So this was like a big deal for me personally, because it was like me finally saying like, okay, I'm not going to pretend to be Christian anymore around my family or anybody else. I'm going to claim my own spiritual path, and I'm going to claim the title of witch, which again, like, is a personal choice. You're not any less of a magical practitioner if you don't want to use that term. I like that term, so I use it. So I came up with my own dedication ritual, which I felt like was really powerful because it was what I wanted to do. It resonated for me, right? So that was something that I did myself, and I thought that that was beneficial because it flipped a switch in my mind. So, like, a lot of people talk about spell work, and like spell work to me really is like all in your mindset and your intention and like what you want to do, and that's really where the magic is. It's inside you, and whatever tools you use is what you use to focus that intention and that power that's inside you, right? So dedications are really beneficial for that, because if you decide I'm going to work with this deity, or I'm going to go down this path and I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to do this, a dedication ritual can really get your mind focused on that specific thing, and it can kind of make you feel tied to it and give you some self accountability, right? Because after I dedicated myself and called myself a witch, I was like, all right, I'm in this. Like, I'm going to try to do something every day to help improve my craft or to learn something new every day. Like, even if it's small, like, even if it's holding this crystal and meditating for 5 minutes, or listening to this podcast on my way to work about witchcraft, or reading a chapter of a book a night. Like, I'm going to do something every day to grow in my craft, right? That was what my dedication was about. And that helped me learn a lot. And I'm not saying I know everything now or even a whole lot now, but I know a heck of a lot more than I did when I started and I dedicated. The initiation process, though, was so different because that wasn't anything I had anything to do with. Like, that initiation process was planned for me by my coven. And I went into it not really knowing what kind of tests they were going to put me through, right? What kind of trials they put me through. And the point of that initiation was, for me, can I prove to myself, because it was more for me about myself, like what I can do, even though it's them seeing what you can do too. But like for me, it was like, can I prove to myself that I can do this, that I'm strong enough, motivated enough, ready even to be in a coven and meld my energy with other people and tie myself to other people magically, because that's a sacred and spiritual thing, right? So like the tone was totally different for the initiation, but it was beneficial to me because it proved, I went through a series of tests, right? And even though I didn't come up with those tests and I wasn't judging how I did on those tests, at the end of that whole thing, I felt so much more powerful. Like I felt so much more confident, like I had proved something just to myself. Like that's really what that was about for me. So I think both are super beneficial for your growth as a witch, and as a magical practitioner, whatever title you use, because like your dedications can like help you focus your mind on this thing that you want to do and you want to grow in, whereas initiations you can prove to yourself that you have done that work, that you have done that growth that you said you were going to do, right? um so that's kind of what it is for me, and I know it's different for each person and it depends on what you're initiating into and all that stuff, but for me, like that's how those two went kind of together in full circle, because it was like I dedicated myself to this, and then I was put through the ringer on it, and then I proved to myself and to other people, of course. But really, the big thing was to me that I could do it, and that I was ready, and that I had made progress. Not that, like I said, that I think I'm done learning by any means. I'm never done learning, but I got to see my progress, and that was really powerful for me, to come from the dedication to the initiation. It was like a journey, right? And that was just I think that's why it's beneficial for people, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what both of you have said. I think that for me, I think dedications are optional in the sense that if you personally feel the need to commit yourself to your own personal understanding of the divine, or to the craft, I think that's a decision between you and the higher power or higher powers that be within you, between and betwixt you. Um, Initiations to me, because I view initiations as less of a self thing and more of a group thing. I think initiations are mandatory, not optional. So if you decide, I'm going to dedicate myself as a priestess of Aset or Isis or Wajit, like that's an option if you feel like that particular divinity is calling you to do so. Or if you decide I'm going to dedicate myself to the path of the craft, the spiral path, right? Like that's an option that you have as a witch to formally dedicate yourself and wash yourself in these abysmal waters. An initiation is mandatory to me in the sense that like you are not going to access these traditions, um, without initiating into them. But as I'm saying this and as I'm thinking this, per my comedic comment earlier, talking about, ISIS and Wajit and whatever, it also begs the question too, and this is a common thing that I see also in blogs written on Pathos, right? Is if you have to be initiated, who initiated the first witch? And I'd love to hear what both of you think of that. And, I kind of think too, like, who initiated the first witch? Well, what was that witch being initiated into? Because, like, for me, kind of like I said, my definition of an initiation is being brought through a trial, being brought into a tradition. So I don't think in order to just be a witch necessarily, you need to be initiated. I think in order to be a witch of a specific magical order or tradition, there's initiations that would come into play, but then who initiated that witch, right? Like, it's kind of like the whole question of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Um, you know, what do we think, Sid? What do we think? What are our thoughts?
Um, I don't. This is a hard one. Okay, so like when it comes to, you know, who who was the high priest, the high priestess, the Shuvani, the all-star basketball player, if you will. If it comes to these people, who helped them get into the work, I feel like it's safe to say, and I don't think this is safe to say for everyone. I don't think this is safe to say even for our elders. I don't think it's safe to say for even the people, who are like, the top 10, most read books of, magical history. I don't think it's safe to say for them because God's knows they were fucking around and finding out.
She's about to say something controversial yet brave.
We all know that, like, the way Aleister Crowley was set up, he was dipping and dabbing with people and magic. Okay. um we all know when it comes to oh, Anton LaVey. You know what I mean? He was tipping and tapping with the work he was wanting to do with the devil, the Lucifer, and some women. Okay, okay, and that's not any shade. It's just for real. I feel like a lot of our magical practitioners that came before us that are usually cis hetero men. You know what I mean? Like, I think they, just especially being YT people, especially being white people. I mean, I'm very sure that they were just like, I'm a witch. Yeah, 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 I claim that. You know what I mean? And I don't feel like, to me, I guess I don't ponder this question that much because of the way our systematic oppression is like set up. And being like a black woman, I just feel like it's not really up to me on like what came first. It's more so of, when I'm initiating into something, do I know that person of this era? You know what I mean? Like, if I'm a part of any group, I like to know the facts. Where'd you get started? What's your upbringing? What you been doing in the craft? And do I get along with you? Do I get along with the way that you practice? Do a lot of our ideals mix, but also sometimes clash? You know what I mean? I think that's like a healthier way to look about it, because if you obsess a little bit over the idea of like who did the work, obviously we can see that Wicca is recognized. So whether we, are in for all these different older people, the elders, if you will, if they did the work or not, they did do something, you know. Will we say it's a great thing? Yeah, to an extent, you know. Bravo. You did that. Uh-huh. But for the witches that come after that, for the witches like us, like, the most you need to know, baby, is that my craft mother's right there. Okay? And that's on period.
And Sid, for those who are listening who maybe don't know some of this vocabulary, like, when you say craft mother, define that.
Um, I mean, with you being my craft mother and all, I believe like that while I was walking on the path, like, you found me in a way. I'm very certain you were the one who added me first. I'm just saying. And, once we got to Kikian and you were like, babe, what? What do you mean you're not a witch? I'm seeing all these things. I thought you were in this group I made and everything. And I'm like, no. I feel like you found me in a time where I was still trying to figure out if walking the path was meant for me or not. And then as to kind of time, the time we spent together, as time kind of went on, you started seeing like the changes I was making on my own. But also, too, you were also helping me understand a lot of the concepts that I was like struggling with, such as, babe, I got, you know, freaking DNA related to Vikings. How do I do that when I've been walking this path this whole time, very mono, if you will, monogamous, if you will, with, Isis and Thoth and Anubis? Like, what do I do? You're like, yeah, you just marry meat. And I'm like, what? So, for a craft mother, for craft mothering, being a mother hen, if you will, I feel like you were very much like, yeah, when push came to shove, you were basically like, I think that's a good idea. If you want to do that, I support you. Um, I'm not sure about that, baby. Maybe let's pull some cards on that and then we'll continue. I felt like you were that craft mother for me. And I feel like not everybody has that because so many people are looking for quote unquote mentors, or quote unquote like seers and quote unquote messiahs and shit like that. But for me, I just needed like a like mom, if you will.
Thank you for clarifying. I think that craft mother it's definitely like more of a neo term. And I think it's important to kind of identify some of the vocabulary that we're using because I know that we all kind of come from, different places. And anyway, Paige, what would you like to add to this dialogue, to this discourse?
I always assumed that craft mother, or craft father, or craft parent, or whatever you want to use, meant the person that was in charge of initiating you. So, like, since I've been initiated into your coven, you're my craft mother. So, like, from here on out, even if, I leave the coven or you leave the coven someday, we're still tied together because you were my first person that ever initiated me into a magical group, or tradition. So that's kind of how I view it. And so, because of that, like, as a high priestess or a high priest or whoever, someone may be, like, they have a responsibility. Once you initiate somebody into your coven, like, that's somebody that you've agreed to take on in your group and kind of help and, you know, oversee, like, how they fit into the coven and like what they can add and what they need, and things like that. And it's almost like it's not really like, I don't want to say, I hesitate to use the word mentor because so many people in witchcraft are like, I just want a mentor, I just want a mentor, and that's really not what it's like. But it is like a source of knowledge, like somebody you can sort of, like Sid was saying, run things past, which is nice. Um, and I think that initiation process helps bond all of us together, but especially the high priestess or the high priest or whoever is doing the, in charge of the initiation, because they're the ones who are guiding the initiate through the process, and like at the end of the initiation are kind of welcoming them in. And usually, that makes the bond like even stronger. So I bond with all my coven mates, and I love them all and I feel close to them all. But the bonds are different between my coven siblings versus my craft mother. That's a different, just a different feeling. And it's not bad that it's different. It's not better or worse. It's just different, And I think that I could talk to anybody in the coven about anything I needed to. Um, but it's just like with different people, I'll go to about different things, right? And it's just like a family. You go to mom for one thing, whereas you might go to your sister for something else. And that's kind of the dynamic that I think it sort of sets up. And it really very much makes you feel like a family. So the initiation process helps jumpstart that and kind of really like sets the tone for how the group is structured. Like if you ever go through an initiation, like you got to kind of pay attention to everyone's role in that initiation, because that will give you an idea a little bit of what their role is going to be within the group. And after you're initiated, you can always ask too, like, hey, what would my role be in the initiation process if we were going to initiate someone else after me? Because that'll give you an idea of what your role is too, which I think is cool. So lots of benefits to the initiation process just in the way that you set up your magical group, and like also how you relate to other people in that group.
Well, and I think another thing that could be beneficial to talk about that kind of ties in what both of you said. Sydney, earlier you were talking about like, you were not necessarily looking for, right? Like a mentor. You just happened to be quote unquote, like kind of like found by like a craft mother and you were like shepherded in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely.
Paige, you're talking about how, this whole aspect of like family. And I definitely think that, for our coven, I think that's a big reason why we have survived over the years. I mean, statistically, most covens crash and burn within 3 years. Not every single coven is going to be the OTO. Not every single magical order is going to last 40 years, 50 years, 100 years. The truth is most magical orders and most covens, most magical groups rise and fall in the 3 year period. And we've surpassed that and we've continued to do so even when local groups even have had a hard time. And I think a big reason for that is because there really is this aspect, and I hate to say like perfect love and perfect trust because that just sounds so cringy. Um, but I definitely think that like this aspect of like genuine connection, camaraderie, kinship, and family is kind of what separates it, other than like this cold sort of machine that's like you do this, then you do that, then you initiate to this, then you elevate to that, then you practice this, and your role is that, right? Um, like I kind of think that, at least for me, as the quote unquote craft mom, as the HP, like I feel like we're all um like there's not just like one HP. Like I feel like everyone in their own right is a priest or priestess or whatever word they would like to use. And an HP is just kind of like the PTA mom, the organizer, um, the catalyst or the cardinal. But like I think that one of the beautiful things in our group is that like really everyone holds power. There's not like one person necessarily I should say, who is holding the sacred flames are kind of dispersed throughout the group. But I guess to kind of like tie this in with stuff that we've talked about before, how did you know for yourself that you were in a good place or a safe place? With me, and also in general for someone else who's listening. Let's say someone is listening who is attending a ritual or a rite or something, and what signs should they look for that this quote unquote craft mother or parent or HP is a good fit for them? What would you say, Sydney, they should look for?
Um, I would say common ground would be one thing. I felt like even though I wasn't looking for that kind of energy, I received that kind of energy. Um, and I feel as though in that time of my life, like what I was looking for was just like kind of like having like a big sister in a way, because I'm an only child in general. And for me, I wasn't really thinking about it. It just kind of like worked out, I guess. Like, I feel like people should look out for the type of energy they want in their life. You know what I mean? Like, you're my mother in the craft, but we kiki like sisters too. And sometimes we fight like sisters as well, you know? And, was I looking absolutely for that kind of relationship? Not really. That wasn't the outline, but that's just kind of what happened. I feel like too, you always had a good way of explaining things from A to Z of like, this is the origin, here's what's going on, this is what we're doing. Um, uh, Excuse me, as like a fixer that I am, and as a cardinal you are, it was nice to just kind of like fix little things. Like when we did like an event together, when I did like art for you or when like doing branding for you, it just kind of worked out at the time. I don't think everybody's relationships, you know, is going to be the same because it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a mentor, then yes, I definitely saw you in the light as being a mentor, but that was like, maybe a year or two down the line. I just knew that I loved to kiki with you and that we could talk 3 or 4 hours at a time and somehow we weren't tired. um, and it just so happened that when we would, um, practice and work together and, develop our relationship as like just two individuals, you just had a way of stating things that I could make sense of it. And I feel like when it came to a lot of like craft books or books on magic and things like that, like OTO or like Aleister Crowley or things like that just seemed like they were just tarnished with this like sacred enshroudedness, which is fine, but also too, it makes those books kind of hard to read. I need somebody who can break it down. Like, I can break it down myself, but sometimes it's nice to just get an overview of what's to come if you read any of this man's work. Um, Same thing with tarot, same thing with astrology. It just seemed like easy as one, two, three, as simple as do, re, mi. But I had to practice in order to get it. I didn't get it just because you told me. I got it because I kept working at it in the steps and ways that you made it easy for me to follow, you know? So I feel like if you're wanting a craft parent at all, out instead of like a mentor, I would say start looking for people who give good direction, who can, listen to your issues, not talk over you, not berate you, and not beguile you in any sort of way. And make sure that these people are not just yes people. You do need people who can tell you no.
Thank you. Paige, what would you like to add?
I agree. I really like got to know you through your classes. So I think I would like to resonate what Sydney said. Um, I am in an industry that works a lot with teachers, so I know what it means to be a good teacher. And to be a good teacher is like patience and the ability to explain things several different ways. Like I think that that was really valuable to me, like somebody who was patient and who could help other people understand complex things and like didn't shun people for like not knowing and kind of welcome them in. So that made me feel really comfortable. And then like really just getting to know people on a personal level. Like we spent, and we talked about this in another episode, but we spent a lot of time outside of the classroom, getting to know one another, like going out to dinner together or like attending events together, or, like you came on vacation with me one time, so like that was really important too. But I'm not saying that like people who are looking for someone in the craft to give them advice or like like lead them through a process or whatever necessarily need to go on vacation with them or something like that. But I think you should look for somebody who really wants to get to know you as a person and isn't just interested in taking things from you. Like it would have been really easy for you to just be like, yeah, you're just a student in my class and like, give me your money, that really wasn't what you're about at all. Like you genuinely wanted each and every one of your students to grow, whether they were going to be in your coven one day or not. That didn't matter. You just wanted to see them grow and find the path that was right for them. And like, you were always there to like give extra time and advice, which was really sweet of you. And you didn't have to. So that to me, like it really is like kind of sussing out someone's intentions. Whoever you tie yourself to, you have to make sure that they truly, truly want you to understand what they're trying to teach you and to grow as a practitioner. Like, really, that should be their goal. It should be the same as your goal. Like, if their goal is just to take money from you or just to take, energy from you or whatever, like, that's not probably a good fit. but you have to kind of look at somebody and say, okay, what do they want to see in me? And it should be the advancement of you on your path, whatever path that you want to take. And like, I wouldn't even say necessarily that, um, Jasmine and I practice the same way because we really don't. And like, I wouldn't even say that we always believe the same things, but you've always been respectful of that from me and like been really mindful when you talk about what you believe and what you practice and have always said, this is what I do. This may not be what for you, and that's okay. Like, same thing with Sid, like you've always been like, this is kind of what I do because I took a class with Sid too, and or that Sid taught too. And it was very much like, this is what I do, and you can try it, but you don't have to. It's totally okay. And I think that whoever someone looks for in the community as a leader or as someone who is a source of knowledge should keep that in mind is like, they need to respect what I am and am not comfortable with, or what I do and do not believe. And they need to do it in a non-condescending, non-judgmental way. And that's kind of my input on that. How to find somebody that's good.
Well, thank you both so much for coming onto the podcast. I'm looking at the time here and we're just past the 46-minute mark. And we do have to be kind of conscientious about our pre-recorded time on StreamYard, as I've recently discovered, as I told you both. So I think this is where we are going to kind of wrap up. I would like to allow you both to kind of leave any closing thoughts in terms of initiations, dedications, and HPs. Like, if either of you have any kind of last comments to make, and under, I would say, about 2 minutes or less, I would encourage that and welcome that. Sydney?
Choose wisely. Okay? Choose wisely when it comes to who you want to interact with, who you share energy with, who you craft with, and who you do magic with. Choose wisely.
And Paige?
Going off, I agree with Sid too on that. And then also just even further, like, trust your own intuition when it comes to this. Do what feels right to you. Um, you're going to know if you really check in with yourself and you really become self-aware and you really reflect, you're going to know what works and what doesn't for you. And while you should be willing to try things that you've never tried before and be open-minded and open to trying things, like if there's something telling you like this person ain't right or this isn't right, this doesn't feel good, like follow that and listen to that. Because I think too often we ignore it, especially when we're new to the craft and we're like, oh, we want to be accepted. We want to try everything. Go slow, do what feels right.
Very good advice. Very good advice. And thank you both again for joining. This has been your favorite podcast, As the Cauldron Bubbles. And until next time, blessed be.
Blessed be.